COVID got you down? Let's give you something to laugh about. This is Funny Like a Clown podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Wirth, episode 82, October 20th, 2020. Here to discuss a New York guy who made a tap into the Boston scene, Mr. Colin Quinn. I guess we call him an underground comic, and never hit the mainstream, but man, he did enough that every local comic was drooling to do what he pulled off in comedy. As always, Funny Clown Podcast is brought to you by G Vegas Buffalo Sauce. And for those of you who are tuned into the video, not audio portion of the podcast, look what I got here. Ooh, I got a little bit of G Vegas Buffalo Sauce. Oh, is that looking yummy? Oh, it's looking yummy. G Vegas, baby. You are entering G Vegas. It's hot, hot, hot. Go to www.gvegas.webs.com. Order yourself up some buffalo sauce, man, and get it shipped right to your door. And during COVID, you want it shipped to your door. You don't have to go grocery shopping, you know. Shipped right to your door. Fresh, go green. Support the local guy. Colin Quinn, man, what can you say about this guy? One tough customer, and we'll go on to prove that. Former cast member of Saturday Night Live. That's, you know, pretty much every comic's dream is, you know, if you're going to make it in comedy, Saturday Night Live, man, that's one you'd want to host, okay? Be a member of that, you know, that's the stepping stone to greatness right there. So many great comics that come out of Saturday Night Live, where he was privileged enough to anchor one of the most popular segments of the show, the Weekend Update. Before that, he was also on the 1980s MTV game show Remote Control, which if you're an old dude like me, you remember MTV was probably the last of the stations where, you know, usually you get up and you'd see, you know, look at the TV guide or look at the, you know, what's on TV, you know, what am I going to watch? Where when MTV, it was like whatever was on that station, that was what you were going to watch. It was a station you tuned into. It didn't matter what they were playing, you know. You didn't look at the TV guide. You just knew you were turning on MTV as a kid. Whatever was on, that was what you were watching. That was less of the stations that could say that. You tuned in just to see the station, not so much, you know, you didn't really care what they were playing. He was known as the sidekick on the show to the game show's host. He was kind of the Ed McMahon of the show, where, you know, Ed McMahon was always Johnny Carson's sidekick on the Tonight Show. Well, Colin Quinn, he was the sidekick on the game show, there for comic relief, a little bit of added comic humor to the show. And, yeah, you know, you always need something to laugh about, and, you know, they do that. They, you know, any good movie, they always got that one funny character to add some comic relief to the, you know, whether it's a serious thing or whatever it is, because you always need that comic relief in a show. People are looking for that. Also part of the highly successful Comedy Central show, Tough Crowd. He was the host of that. That was, I guess, probably where he made his biggest name for himself. Had a lucrative film career. Never really, you know, major characters, but some side characters in some of the biggest movies of the time. A Night at the Roxbury, Grown Ups with Amy Schumer. He was acclaimed by his peers as a comics comic. Okay, so that means you've earned the respect of other comics, which here in Boston, they don't really do that. They like to think they're better than you. No matter what you accomplish, they can never give you a compliment. Yeah, that's cute, but I'm from Boston. I can do better, bitch, okay? That's what you hear. So nobody ever pats anybody on the back around here. We just kind of kick everybody down. And, you know, that's a Boston thing. They don't get that, you know. I've traveled around doing comedy. You know, go to Vegas, they don't do that. You go to L.A., Hollywood, they don't do that. I've been to Alaska, they don't do that. But here in Boston, that's how we show love. We kick each other down and we shit on each other, basically. So, welcome to Boston. If you can't handle it, get the fuck out. That's what we say, right? But that's how we express love, okay? You know, and then not everybody gets that kind of humor and that kind of love. But even a lot of free agent sports, you know, they won't come here because they say they don't want to deal with the Boston attitude. You know, you got people who don't even know you. They're patting you on the back. You're looking at, you know, what are you patting me on the back? You don't even know me. But that's what we do. We're so into what, you know, the comedian heroes we have around here. Those are our lives, our sports teams. We follow them. That's what we root for, and we're passionate about it, and we express our passion, you know, in probably more of a boisterous way than other people. And I remember I went with my brother one time out drinking, and I asked the lady, could I grab another beer, and about 5 minutes went by. Maybe I had too much to drink. She didn't want to serve me right away. I'm like, can I get another beer? She's like, I heard you the first time. I'm like, oh, I thought you missed me because it's 5 minutes later and I don't have my beer. But I guess he was apologizing for me later, so maybe I didn't get the whole thing. I don't know, but I know if you get me my beer quick, I'm likely to give you a bigger tip than if you wait me 5 minutes. But hey, she's doing her job. What can I tell you? So he's acclaimed by his peers as the comics comic. Some friends of his have credited him as a comic. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Dave Attell, some of the biggest comics of the time, are saying, this is the guy that we enjoy watching. Known also for his one-man show about growing up in New York City. Okay, so I guess he put on a one-man show about growing up in New York City, which had to be adventurous. Okay, speaking of adventurous, as you can see the video portion, I'm wearing my Van Halen t-shirt for this podcast because sadly Eddie Van Halen passed away. Not much to do with comedy, but when a legend like that passes away, you got to pay tribute no matter what field he's in. So paying tribute to Eddie Van Halen with the t-shirt here on today's podcast. Okay, so we go back to Colin Quinn here. He's written and starred in over 7 stage shows, okay? And I pulled off one, man. I printed up a bunch of DVDs and some CDs and stuff. I got 1 CD and 1 DVD out, and then COVID hit, and I got nowhere to sell them. So I guess I could go online and sell them, but my dream was to sell them after comedy shows, and there ain't many comedy shows going on now with the old COVID. But we'll be back, okay? As Welcome Back Carter would say, welcome back. Someday we'll be back. So 7 stage shows, 2 of which he teamed up a longtime buddy Jerry Seinfeld, and A Long Short Story was seen on HBO, and Unconstitutional was on Netflix. So these are some of the biggest meccas for comedy. I mean, he was never one of the biggest names on these, but he was always involved with the biggest names: HBO, Netflix, Comedy Central. I mean, he was always in a part of them. He started in 1984, started stand-up comedy, and I was still, I believe, in high school back then. Maybe junior high. Yeah, I think so, junior high. All right, so, and as we mentioned, 87, he got his big break on MTV's Remote Control. 89, he went over and started doing A&E's Caroline's Comedy Hour, and I believe that's Caroline's Comedy Club down in New York City there, and, probably a late-night thing, because that's when people tuned in, comedy at the time, and I was always a late-night bug, so I always caught those late-night shows, and he did a comedic short called Going Back to Brooklyn. It was a parody song of Going Back to Cali from LL Cool J. So, if you thought Weird Al Yankovic was the only one doing parodies, he wasn't the only guy. I remember Cheech from Cheech and Chong. He did Born in East L.A. It was a parody of Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA. So, he was tapping into that parody scene, okay, and did that video with Ben Stiller, a longtime friend of his, Ben Stiller. Here's a Boston one right here, going to his Boston ties, which we'll tap into that a little later in the podcast. And we had a lot of fans stick around for the fans' comments on this guy, because the fans came out where, they don't always come out for the big comics, but the underground comics, the fans just seem to love these underground comics, man. These are like the guys you root for, now the successful ones, they already made it, but I'm rooting for I'm rooting for this guy right here to make it big, because he's so earned, like, just something huge happening to him. Not that he's ever got to work another day in his life. He's big enough, he can do comedy and not have to have a regular job like some of us, but hey, someday, who knows, But this guy, he's not working, but it'd be good to see him hit the next level of superstar status, But taking it back to the Boston Ties, he co-wrote and produced Celtic Pride, and I'm a huge Celtic fan, and that was with Damon Wayans and Dan Aykroyd, and I wish I could tell you the movie was good, but it wasn't. It was still a legend around these parts, because it was about the Celtics, and they were smart enough to bring in like a bunch of local comics and bring in all the local guys for this. I think they did that with the baseball movie Fever Pitch also. They're bringing in all the Boston guys, because even if you do a cameo, just a little thing in those movies, it's still a credit to your name, and that's what's selling comedy around here. And you give it back, and that's what keeps comedy going. So Celtic Pride. Let's see, Bob Sheehy was in that movie. He's a local guy that I work with, and I got a movie we're putting together. We're going to be releasing on Amazon Prime, God knows when, maybe a year from now. But look for it, called The World Needs a New Superhero. And we had Bob, he did a cameo role as a used car salesman in my movie. So look for my movie coming out. Look for Celtic Pride. And hopefully I can follow in the footsteps of Colin Quinn here. 1996, he was brought on as a writer for Saturday Night Live. So that was how he eventually got the gig. 97, 98, a cast member. Known for Lenny the Lion and Joe Blow. Those were his two famous skits where, Eddie Murphy was Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood and Gumby. Well, those were his popular skits at the time. And as we already mentioned, Anchor in the News segment, which is, Dennis Miller just made that news segment legendary. So, let's see, he anchored that after Norm Macdonald got fired because Norm was talking too much about O.J. Simpson there. They fired him, and Colin took over until the year 2000. While on that show, I guess Mike Myers offered him a role in Austin Powers, and he turned it down, and he said that was the only project he ever turned down that he ended up regretting because it went on to, as we know, to be such a big hit. And, everybody wants you to do something, and you can't do everything. There's only so many hours in a day. There's so much I'd like to do in comedy, but there's only so many hours in a week. It's like I get to it because you can't do everything at the same time. And right now I'm focusing on the movie. That's my big project of right now. I got the podcast I'm loving doing, which, COVID's hurting me in one way. I'm not being able to perform live, which is nothing like performing live, but I ain't letting it keep me down too bad. Well, I can't do that. I'm going to keep doing some other stuff. I'm going to sit home and be scared because that's not how I live my life, okay? If I go out, I'm going out doing what I love to do, baby. I'll tell you that. I ain't going to go home. I'm going to go out sitting home eating a candy bar or something, wishing I had did something with my life. Be safe. That's the key. Be safe. If you're going to do something, be safe about it, okay? And hope for the best. That's what I do. Everybody's got to do what's best for them. That's what's best for me. So turn down Austin Powers. Yeah, that's a tough one. But I mean, yeah, some of the biggest shows of our time, there's always somebody who turned them down, and there's always regret. And you're always going to have that regret because, like I said, you can't do everything. So everybody's going to have some regret. I wish I did that, but at the time, you don't have the time to do it. So you move on to the next project and hope that project is big. And sometimes, ones you turn down are bigger than the ones you chose. But if you were psychic, you could see the future, what's going to happen, and nobody's psychic. So you make your choices, baby. He made his. 2002, he had a very short-lived NBC show called The Colin Quinn Show. Only lasted 3 episodes and was canceled. And it was actually, the critics actually liked the show, but they canceled it anyway. Must have been due to bad ratings or something. I don't know what, but that didn't hold him down long because Comedy Central came calling, and he made his mark on Tough Crowd, where he discussed politics of the day with fellow comedians, and that went on to do 200 episodes. So went from 3 episodes on NBC to over 200 episodes on Comedy Central, and bam, that's making a name for yourself, baby, right there. Let's see. He was in the animated Shorties Watching Shorties. Some of his stand-up was used in that. 2005, he was part of the USO Tour of military bases, and I guess Bob Hope made that famous back in the day, tour of military bases, and it's something every comic wants to do because they remember Bob Hope doing it, and just it was such a cool thing to do. I'm going to entertain the troops, man. It's like they're fighting for our freedom. They need some comic relief, and I'm going to give it to them. What a honor and a privilege to do that, and usually they want you to work clean. And I remember I had Jackie the Joke Man on my TV show, and he's like, he was going to go entertain the troops, and they're saying, well, you don't work clean. He said, well, you get your priorities straight here, man. Come on. The troops need some entertainment. Finally, they came to their senses and let him go over, which Colin, he's not a filthy comic, but he's not crystal clean either. So, hey, he got to do it. Followed in Bob Hope's footsteps. Thank you, Colin, for your service. That's awesome. He was a regular, and I guess you'd say unofficial sidekick on Nick DiPaolo's radio show, 92.3 FM New York. And he was also a regular on the Opie and Anthony show. And I guess Nick was going to pitch that show to a bigger radio firm. They turned him down, so he went to a local one in New York there, and they did that for a while. And the Opie and Anthony show was one of the biggest radio shows of our time. Started out right here in Beantown, baby, on WAF back in the day. They went on to, once they got booted off of air here, they went to New York, and they got booted off of air there. Then they went to Sirius, and they got booted off air there. And, that's what they were known for, I mean, had they not gotten booted off air, nobody would have wanted them. That's kind of what makes you popular. The risque guys, those are the ones you come looking for, because that's what makes the headlines. There is no bad press. If they're talking about you, good or bad, they're talking about you, man. That's the thing. Now he's taking a turn in his comedy career where most people are taking a turn, and I got insured by a veteran comic. It was something I already knew, but he kind of told me, it's not like the olden days when you had to rely on these big comedy clubs to give you a break. You had to go in and kiss a lot of ass. And I never been an ass kisser. That's why I started my own comedy club, because I wasn't kissing nobody's ass to perform. I don't perform, I'll go do it. And I've been very successful at doing my own thing. But he said, you know what? You can put a cell phone in front of you, hit record, and you're on, man. So you can get somebody to watch you online. I mean, online's taken over. And this is where he turned his attention to, man, was he started doing a web series show called The Cop Show, okay? So if you're doing a web series, that means you're on the web. You're not on TV, you're on the web. You know how many people are on the web? Pretty much millions, okay? So you probably got a bigger, if not bigger, audience on the web than you do on TV now. So, I mean, you're not controlled by the television industry anymore. Anybody can be a star. It's how bad do you want it? How funny are you? And who's going to tune you in? And that's why I thank you guys for tuning in Funny Like Clown Podcast, because I'm having fun, and it's good to see you guys are having fun with me. Known for his one-man shows on Broadway, and hey, Broadway, not everybody gets to do Broadway, so making a lot of money over there, You get on TV, and the TV ain't the biggest paying gigs, but that gets you the exposure that people want to see you once you've been on TV, and that's where you make your money when you hit Broadway and you start selling tickets, okay? So advertisement on TV gets him to sell tickets, and that's how he's making his living. Never has to work a regular job another day in his life. Also, here's an interesting one. He's known for his Twitter account, where he purposely puts controversial tweets out there, where he gets people so riled up about doing that he gets a little bit of a following. Who is this guy? Now they know who you are. They're either happy about what you tweeted or upset about you tweeted. But either way, you're getting recognized. That's a genius move right there. I just may tweet something controversial in the morning, just to see how it works out, okay? Maybe I'll be the new controversial guy, who knows? But I did actually one time. I posted a picture of a Jimi Hendrix statue with graffiti on it, and it was from years ago, but I posted it during the time when all these Black Lives Matter riots were going on, and the independent fact checkers ended up covering it up, even though I never said it was from the time. They felt it was false information because of when I released it, I guess, So, but I had people I didn't even know, because so many people had shared that post. I had so many people just like commenting on it that didn't even know me before that. So they may not have liked me from it, but people who didn't know me before, they know me now. So hey, world's at your fingertips, man. Don't let it go to waste, I guess. Yeah, I remember, geez, we did a comedy show one time, and the host was saying, we're at a major club. It was the Funny Bone, and they're saying, hey, we got the big logo behind it. Get out your thing and record your set. Don't let it go to waste. You're here. You get the opportunity, Use that for advertisement. Why wouldn't you do that, So, let's see. His personal life, he's known for practicing meditation, which, I didn't even realize. Like, every now and then you just get so stressed out you kind of close your eyes to calm down. And that's kind of a form of meditation right there, where you just take a few deep breaths in and, take a few deep breaths out. It's only a few seconds, but it does help. And because I do that, I've thought about doing it more. Well, if it helps me, I'm good. But 2 seconds, imagine if I did it for a few minutes or did it for a half hour. I bet that'd really calm me down. And I was tuning in some other podcasts where they're talking about, you can actually get yourself into another level when you try not to think of anything. You get in such a relaxed level that, you catch a buzz from that high of being so relaxed. So, meditation, man, try that out. Instead of going for the booze, instead of going for the drugs, go for the meditation. Try to get your buzz from that. I get a buzz from comedy. That's what I like doing. That's my buzz. So what's your passion in life? Get your buzz from that. 2018 got a little slowed down. He had a heart attack, and he did recover from that successfully. Didn't slow him down for long, because in 2019, a year later, he got married to Late Night with Seth Meyers' producer. So hope they're living happily married ever after. Congratulations to him. He was number 56 on Comedy Central's 100 Greatest Comedians of All Time. And this was done back in the day. This was all like the legends of comedy we grew up on. And, there's so many comics that have hit it big since then. I'm sure it'd be a whole new list if you did it today. But to me, that was the godfather of comedy lists right there for our time, what we grew up on. And it was the inspiration for this podcast because, they did a TV show on Comedy Central, and I watched it, where they just had some, regular comics like myself. They'd sit down and they'd give their thoughts of all the comics that inspired them, all the great comedians of our time, and they just talked about them for an hour. This one on the list, they talk about what they did, like we're doing on the podcast. And I was so inspired by that show. I was like, it was over the hour. I'm like, no, keep going. I want to keep talking about this, and that's what inspired the podcast for me. I get to talk every week about comedy. I love comedy, and hey, the show didn't go on, but this podcast did, and we're talking about comedians every week. So, number 56 on the greatest of all time, and almost Irish Magazine put him down in the top 100 Irish comedians of all time. And I don't know who's Irish and who's not, but a lot of Irish here in Beantown, man. And I guess that's why you'd have to come over. And some other movies he was in, like I said, not big roles, not little roles, but just to be mentioned in this movie. I remember I had Steve Sweeney. He was on a radio show. I was guest on the radio show, and Steve called in. I was booking him on a show, and he was talking about how he's going to be in the movie The Equalizer, and he said he was on film. He was on set for 3 days, and the radio DJ was asking him, so how many minutes does that equal out into in the movie? He's like, I don't know. And he kept harping on him, how many minutes? He's like, how many minutes you got in the movie? I don't know. Whatever they give me, they give me. I don't know. I mean, well, it's just being seen in it. It's it's a privilege. Whatever they give you, they give you. You're just happy to be in it. So, Colin, not big roles, but man, he was in the movies. 3 Men and a Baby, and I think that was Steve Guttenberg, Ted Danson, and I forget who the other one's. 3 Dads Raising a Baby. Tom Selleck, I believe it was. Let's see, Crocodile Dundee 2, and that was one of the big hits at the time during the MTV thing. And I remember he was on Remote Control. They had a couple contestants on, and I forget who it was, some game show host in there from another game show, and they said, this member who's in our studio is in the movies Crocodile Dundee 2, and named a few movies, and they just she chose the big star, not thinking Colin was there too. When he chose the big star, he's like, oh, trick question, man, you got me. Okay, it was Colin Quinn, but nobody thought of him because you figured they were paying tribute to the star. But Crocodile Dundee, I've seen all those movies, and they were definitely great to grow up on. Other ones he was in, Married to the Mob, Night at the Roxbury, some TV he did, The Cosby Show. Who didn't watch that, man? We all grew up with TV's dad on The Cosby Show. And the Ben Stiller Show. Not Bueller. Yeah, Ben Stiller. He was a comedian in his own right. Space Ghost, Coast to Coast, Inside Amy Schumer, The Jim Gaffigan Show. These are just all, some of the biggest names in comedy, and he's getting a guest appear on their shows. So that's kind of how it is. Once you make the big time, it's a wink, wink. You come on my show, I come on your show. We take care of each other. Even at the lower levels, it's like that. I mean, if you put on 5 comedy shows and ask somebody to be on that show, well, if they put on a comedy show, they damn well better ask you to be on it. Otherwise, you're probably not thinking of them again. And fair or not, that's kind of how it works. Other than that, I mean, we mentioned his Saturday Night Live, history with them, which is one of the biggest, sketch comedy shows at the time. Well, their competitor in Living Color, they actually hired him to be a writer on that show. So they were tapping into that Saturday Night Live stuff they were trying to imitate. And for a while in Living Color, they didn't only imitate it, they actually surpassed them, but they didn't have the longevity that Saturday Night Live did, and probably never will. Colin Quinn, man. Now let's get to my favorite part of the show. Let's see what the fans had to say about him, because the fans write in, and that's my favorite, because this show is for the fans, about the fans, with the fans. And let's see what they had to say about Mr. Colin Quinn. Some people loved him, some people didn't. Rodney Wirth writes in, MTV's Remote Control. And like I said, MTV's a shell of what it was, man. Back in the day, that was the #1 station for kids on TV. You were a teenager, you didn't care what was on. You didn't look at the TV guide, you simply turned on the MTV channel, and that's what you were watching, baby. David Graham writes in, I saw him working on a new bit at the Cellar with Greg Giraldo, and 2 weeks later, Greg died. So, yeah, that's got to be, the Comedy Cellar he's talking about, the New York Comedy Club. Every now and then the big stars pop in, and he was there working on some new material with Greg Giraldo, and 2 weeks later, sadly, Greg died. Greg was one of the big comedians, man. He was really just starting to tap into his major. He had hit stardom, but then you go to major stardom. He was just starting to tap into that. And as many comedians are, gone way before his time. Let's see. David Daddio. The time he confessed to letting a cat lick his dick. All right, well, who hasn't done that? Come on, Bob. I mean, sure. All right. No, yeah, I don't know what Bub's talking about there. Bub Daddy-O. All right. With a name like Bub Daddy-O, who knows what he's doing? Noel B. Murphy, hanging with him in New York City. And yeah, I remember I stopped in to do a set at the Gotham Comedy Club, and I was on the late show, and the early show had just got done, and I was in the green room, and guess who I crossed paths with? Jerry Seinfeld and Jim Gaffigan, and it was cool just to be in their presence, and I guess, yeah, when you get to, hang with your fellow stars, I got to hang out with Carl LeBove, who was Sam Kinnison's best friend in opening act, and Sam passed away. I couldn't hang with Sam, but man, I got to hang with Carl LeBove, his best friend. I got to hang with his brother, Bill Kinnison, and always cool hanging out with the legends, man, your heroes, the guys you grew up with. Ned Rice, my first ever TV writing job was for him on Remote Control. Funniest guy ever and a real cool cat. And it's good to hear he's a cool cat, because I hate these guys that forget where they came from, where they look down on, the lower comics and forget where they came from, The good comics, man, they don't forget where they came from. They help you. They remember what it was like. And I've met some good ones. I've met some bad ones. It's all part of the business, but it is cool to hear when somebody else had a good experience with a good one. It's cool to hear about that. Ted Wyman, running into him in a crowd at an outdoor concert, and yeah, sure. I mean, we were hanging out at the casino with Carl LeBove, and it was like, I was kind of surprised. We're just sitting there playing slot machines and drinking a few beers, and people are walking by, and it's like, hey, we love the show, man. And, we're getting complimented on the show, and it was just cool when you just run into one of your stars, just out in everyday life like that, where you was somewhere where you wouldn't expect to see him. You expect to see him at a comedy show, you wouldn't expect, to be at a concert. I remember that I invited a girl one time to go to a Van Halen tribute show with me, and she's like, well, why wouldn't you invite me to a comedy show? I'm like, well, I do comedy every day. What, I can't like Van Halen too just because I'm a comedian? I got other interests other than just comedy. Come on. Let's see. Evan Allen. Dude, the new movie Drunk Parents with Will Ferrell and Colin Quinn as homeless dudes accidentally setting themselves on fire. Laugh out loud. So, guess that's a funny one to look for. A couple of genius comedians there teaming up with Will Ferrell. There's nothing wrong with that. Bill Sonia writes in Kerry Whirler. I'm not sure what he was referring to there, but seems like a funny thing, I guess. I don't know. Let's see. Doug Karp, colonoscopy. I guess in reference to his name. He's doing a parody on Colin's name. Let's see. Lawrence Riley Tompkins going up after him at the Boston Comedy Club in New York City. His set always leaves the room on fire. And yeah, these big comics, they come in these rooms and do guest sets, and they're not like their local comics where you got to wait your turn. When they walk in the door, they don't wait for jack squat, man. They're the next comic on because they're a star. The clubs are just happy to have them there. Now, they go in and tear up the room, then it's like, all right, you're next. And they go, well, how the hell do I follow that? Well, you don't. Welcome to comedy. That's how it works. Just be happy to be there, okay? Don't complain about it. Mike Balbetto, I never met him. Well, a lot of people ain't met Mike, no shit. All right, good for you. Thanks for writing in there, man. That's great comment. Let's see. Rich Carusi, performing at Cha-Cha's in Little Italy with him. Cha-Cha's, all right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, anytime you get to perform on a show with, a comedy legend, that's a great, that's what you do it for, man. Those are the memories you're going to have. I mean, you remember the little shows, but the ones you remember the best are the ones you were on with the big names. Those are the big shows. Ralph Tedder writes in, after a show in Rochester, we had a late dinner at the Pepperell restaurant on Dewey Avenue, where we laughed and laughed. And yeah, it's always good just to hang out and hear the stories. And, I remember, geez, me and my buddy up in Alaska, it was me, him, and Carl, and we were just sitting on the front lawn of his house, and we're sipping beers in lawn chairs, and Carl's just telling us stories, and he's playing us songs, that he wrote on his phone and stuff, and it was like, you have a moment, you just kick back in your chair, and you're like, man, this stuff happens to other people. I can't believe this is happening to me, but always cool to hang with the heroes and hear the stories. They get so many stories, and, the smart kids actually listen to it, some don't. Let's see, Robert Morris, question and answer appearances, and those are always fun, I mean, a lot of clubs won't let you do them, where Rodney Dangerfield used to be famous for it, he'd ask Anybody got any questions about comedy? And then somebody hit him with a question, and he come out with like a wise-ass funny answer. And I remember Rodney Dangerfield one was funny. Somebody yelled out, "How big's your dick?" He's like, "Don't you remember?" It was a classic comeback off the top of his head. I mean, you could sit there and do that all night, and then people get scared to ask a question because you're never going to outmatch a comedian, but you get some drunk who think you would. Luis Vasquez, who? Well, tune in the podcast, you'll find out who. He's the guy right behind you in comedy, Luis. That's who, okay. Hey, tune in the podcast. You know who these guys are? That's why we're doing it, man. We're getting educated on the world of comedy. Cole Young, tough crowd. Yeah, 200 episodes. Who didn't love him for that one, man? Let's see. Johnny Peasy, working with him years ago. Yeah, Johnny, he runs the Laugh Lost Comedy Lounge at the China Blossom up in North Andover, one of the biggest rooms in Massachusetts. And Johnny, he's in the Lenny Clark gang, and going back to the days of the Ding Ho and everything. And he's worked with some of the biggest names that come through his club, and he's on some of the biggest shows in Boston. He's been very privileged, and like I said, even one of the top names of Boston comedy, he's thrilled to be in Colin Quinn's presence, and why wouldn't you be, man? Because that's what it's all about. Dave Stern, that one time that he was almost funny. Well, he'll call you up, Dave, and get some pointers, okay? Maybe he'll accomplish what you have in common. All right, these guys crack me up, man. Put down a comic who's accomplished so much more than you. Woody Wood, did he die? No, he's not dead, okay? All I asked was for memories of him, and you don't have to be dead to have a memory of somebody. Cal Verducci, Remote Control. Yeah, that was, I guess, his first big exposure to the young crowd, and we remembered him for that. Whatever he did, you're going to, oh, yeah, that's the guy from Remote Control. He's done bigger things than Remote Control, but it's always, what you remember for is your first thing, your first big hit, and that show was a big hit back in the day. John Eric, The Laugh Factory, said some choice words to the manager that I wish that I would have liked to have said myself. And yeah, when you're a young comic, you don't really mouth off to the club owner because you won't be back, where Colin, he's got enough of a following in comedy that he can pretty much tell the guy where to shove it, and he's got to put up with it because Colin's going to make you money. And if you're making a club owner money, you can tell a lot more than if you're not making him any money. Rick Jenkins from the Comedy Studio up in Boston, one of the big clubs up there. When stand-up stood out, he tells a story of his first time he played Nick's, which is Nick's Comedy Stop, another Boston comedy club up there. And I recently watched that. I mean, you want to find out how Boston comedy came about, man, and why we have stages to perform on in Boston. Go, it's on YouTube, watch it. I watched it a few times. I watched it again recently when stand-up stood out. And I remember the story. He was talking about, we got such a rivalry, with Boston sports and New York sports, and just such a rivalry between the two big cities. So he comes in, from New York, and he's hitting a Boston stage, and you could tell by his accent he was from New York, talking to a bunch of Bostonians up there. And the first night went really rough for him, and he talks about the story. Tune it in, hear the story. It was a great story where, the big rivalry with the two cities isn't as easy as it is now, and even now it's tough, but back then it was a lot tougher. Eric Powers had a 20-minute conversation on the set of Grown Ups 2 about how Adam Sandler's character didn't step on the line in Grown Ups. He had my rolling great guy. So yeah, a lot of people, man, have met him saying he's a great guy. So that's always cool when you meet someone and they treat you decent instead of looking down on you. And you don't want nobody to look down on you because that's not a cool thing. Look up to people, man. Try to help them out, respect them. Don't forget where you came from. One of the biggest things in comedy. Don't ever forget where you come from. Try to help out the next generation. It's not only a choice, it's a responsibility if you made it in comedy. Now, on the other hand, I've tried to help out a lot of young comics, okay? And the ones that listen to me, they're the ones who get ahead. They're the ones who get the opportunity to work with the Lenny Clarks and the Steve Sweeneys and the guys coming through my rooms, the Jimmy Walkers, the Jackie the Joke Mans, okay? You want to work with these guys, you want to listen to the guy ahead of you, okay? If you want to shoot your mouth out, nah, I can do it better than you, I know better than you. All right, well, the proof is in the pudding. Who you were, oh, that's right, you're going to hit an open mic, okay? So, you want to be a smart mouth 20-year-old kid, you're probably going nowhere. You want to be a smart kid and listen to people ahead of you, welcome to comedy. That might get you ahead. Live long and laugh, folks. Laughter is the best medicine. This is Funny and Clown Podcast. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tune in, hear reviews about your favorite comedian, and it's always fun to talk about your favorite comic because that's the people you love. Tell somebody a joke this week, make them laugh, and until next week, I'll be laughing. Bye-bye.